Actually, it goes back long before that. I mean, I always, actually, if you want to go back to high school, I had a fascination. I bought my first stereo like everybody else, and bought a nice receiver, a nice pair of speakers, and something about it it was actually the speaker side that just fascinated me, and I always wanted to learn more about them. And it was my junior year, and when I was trying to decide what I want to do for college, and that's what actually got me interested in electrical engineering, was the audio, and specifically the speakers. So that was kind of the beginning of this road, and went into high tech for a while, but I eventually came back to audio and started designing some speakers for home audio and even some smaller PA cabinets. And you never know where your road's going to go, but eventually I ended up in the bass amplification world, and applied a lot of my things I've learned about in the home audio world and even the PA world. Took a lot of those formulas or just theories that I developed and applied them into the bass world, and here we are today, 17 years later. One of the first things you had to draw that, to go from one to the other, is realizing what each speaker is used for, essentially. Whether it be a home audio speaker or even a PA speaker, I always say that those speakers are designed to reproduce sound. They're, obviously if you're playing through a PA system, they're reproduced in like you have a mic speaker, let's say, from the guitar or bass, and obviously a home speaker, you're playing off of some kind of a recording format, whether it be CD, album, or whatever. But when you're designing a bass cabinet, it's what I call the producer of tone or sound. That is part of the instrument, essentially. So there's a lot of things that you have to understand or take into account when you're designing something that is the producer of the tone or sound versus the reproducer. There's some things that will make the difference, because I'm sure a lot of bass players can relate to a lot of them think PA speakers and bass cabinets are the same, and they may play through a PA cabinet and it may sound good, but it's just something not quite right. It doesn't feel like your instrument. It just feels like a speaker. So there's a lot of different things that go into that, into the designs of the bass cabinets, where you differentiate the two. They do share similar components. I mean, bass cabinets do need heavier duty components like a PA cabinet, because they're producing a bass instrument, which has a lot of low frequency content. But again, you still have to make sure that you understand what you're designing for, and it is two distinctly different products, although they are similar.
Yeah. So when you're talking about it's just the speaker, not in relationship to the bass.
Right.
What is kind of like without giving out your manufacturing details, but I'm quite interested in it, because I've come from the manufacturer side as well, from TC, but I did design the speakers, but I kind of like spec them out from what I was hearing.
Correct.
And feeling. So I'm pretty interested in how you kind of like tweak it from the PA and the relationship between the bass tone.
Yeah, I think it's just how as we know, everything has various trade-offs, and there's some things I think from a PA perspective you may have to trade off, but I think the trade-off is worth it to give you the feel and the responsiveness that you want from your instrument. And whereas all my cabinets actually would probably have decent PA speakers. In fact, I have one very famous person who used a lot of my earlier bass cabinets for a PA system, and his sound guy actually said to him, "What are you doing here?" And then actually he played a disc through the system, and he walked around, and he was adjusting the EQ. And when he finally got the system all dialed in, the EQ was perfectly flat. So it's just like one person once told me, and it's so true when it comes to engineering and all this. It's an art and a science, and it becomes more of a science once you learn the art. And you know, there are a lot of great textbooks written out there, and you know, whether it be design speakers, you know, cookbooks, whatever. But eventually, you have to step outside and just get a feel and learn and feel and learn the art of it and understand what the little things. It's the little things that make the biggest differences. And so, I mean, we could all follow the same recipe in a cookbook, and we'll probably all 10 people, and they'll probably still come up with 10 different dishes, even though they use the same ingredients in the same cookbook. It's just how you do it, when you do it. And so it's hard to really put it into words, but you just have this feel for what you're doing, and that is what the art is. And it's based in the science. And then once you have your recipe, if you will, then you just apply it towards whatever you're trying to do.
I think actually that sums up also how musicians, you know, when they evolve from theory and that kind of stuff, and then it becomes who am I, spiritually and that kind of stuff, and that's kind of like the
you just feel it.
Yeah.
It's hard to really say this is exactly what I do, or even put it in words. You reach a point, or at least I've reached a point, where once I know what I'm trying to design for, you know, I know what it's going to sound like before I even cut the first piece of wood. And so it just becomes like a sixth sense or second nature, and you know, so it's just, you know, nothing substitutes experience, and I mean that for everybody. I mean, it's like, you know, even musicians. I mean, you don't pick up a bass one day and say I want to be a bass player, and all of a sudden start, you know, laying out Jocko lines or something like that. You have to just keep working at it, and you're gonna fall, you're gonna fail. But I always say a failure is only a failure if you don't learn something from it. And I think people have to understand that you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. And this is basically a culmination of many failures.
One big failure. Hey, Bergantino, thank you.
But it's so true. I mean, and you know something? I enjoy, not that I enjoyed, you know, the quote unquote failures, but I always looked at it as like, is almost like a victory, or something positive, in the sense that, boy, there's more that I don't know that I can still learn, and I'm still learning to this day. So, and that's the other exciting thing that keeps you going and motivated. It's like there's more to learn, there's more to do. The worst thing you ever want to do with whatever it is your passion is, if you don't feel you can continue to grow, then you lose that interest and passion about it. And I just feel that I'm still growing, and I'm looking forward to, you know, continuing doing this.
So you have different lines. You have neodymium lines like HDM, and you have ceramics lines. And I remember you told me the different behaviors between the ceramic and a neodymium speaker.
Right.
Could you?
Well, you know, I know when Neo first came out, probably about 10 years ago, it was even longer actually. You know, you know, there was a lot of debate as to, you had the technical people saying a magnet is a magnet is a magnet. They should sound, if the magnetic field is the same strength, they should sound the same. And, you know, the people like me saying, you know, there's more to it than just one number, you know. And you have to really look at the technology and how it, you know, it's not just the strength of the magnet, it's the geometry of the magnetic field, and how the coil in the woofer reacts to that field, and how the speaker sounds through the travels of that coil. So, you know, I just to try to, you know, maybe bottom line it in a way, you know, contrary, everyone felt early on that Neo was eventually going to sound like ceramic. And I don't think it has, and I don't think it ever will. And it's not because people don't know what they're doing that are working with Neo technology. It's just the nature of the technology that it just can't do it. And, you know, but there's some things about Neo technology that ceramic can't do. And that's why they sound differently. And so, for the most part, the Neo ceramic, in my, you know, from my experience in this industry, has been more of a weight decision than a tone decision for many players. But I still think that, you know, there are desirable tones with each technology.
Yeah.
And you know, I even in my own lineup, being here at the NAMM show, where you have the luxury of having all your cabinets together and watching players go right down the line. And what's interesting is even with the same cabinets and even the same basses with two different players, listening to them play, I can actually prefer one technology or even just one model within a technology sounding better with one player than another and vice versa. So it's really, there's so many variables in this equation that it's really hard to, there's no one right answer, in other words.
I can say the same at the showroom at Bass Buddha, how it amazes me how different things behave.
Right.
And we spoke over the phone regarding where I've been saying, yeah, but it is more complicated than that, you know. So it's really good to have all these systems of different brands, different technologies, and that kind of stuff. And for every time we do an A/B session, I kind of like, oh, and I'm kind of like backing a little bit off, but at the same time, I know kind of like the direction. But the first thing, I need to still see how does this amp and cabinet behave on here.
Right.
Before I kind of like say, okay, maybe you should go there, or this is
exactly,
also,
yeah.
you know.
And actually, it took me to learn that too. You know, I mean, it's something I learned years ago at a NAMM show. I was sharing a booth with a bass luthier, and we, you know, it's interesting. We had a guy playing in the booth, playing through one of my cabs in an amp, and you know, everything sounded really nice. And then another guy was standing there, and this gentleman finished playing, and we passed the bass off to him. He started playing, and I was horrified at how bad my speaker sounded.
Who was the player?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then the gentleman whose bass it was there, like while he was playing, trying to tweak all the treble and tone knobs and all that, just because he was like, what happened, you know? And it's just like, you know, so it starts here, you know. But you know, it was just an eye opener for me to realize that, you know, there's so many variables into what you ultimately hear through here that you have no control over. And everybody, whether it be the instrument, the player, the strings, or anything upstream, is going to affect, it's going to ultimately affect what's the right cabinet for this player.
Yeah, and that's also why I really urge all of you to go out and try stuff, because you can go on Talkbase or Bass Chat or Facebook forums, and people will say, this is the best cabinet, or this is the best amp. You know, it basically, you know, yes, it's the best amp for you.
Right.
You know, and I think that's a really, really valid point to have.
I think another thing too, and just in general, is that a lot of guys that make these, you know, opinions, you know, everyone wants to feel that they bought the best, or they bought the right one, and that's fine. I understand that. But I think in this day and age, as you know more than even I do, but it's the landscape for retail has changed a lot. People are buying things through the internet. They're buying things that they never actually had a chance to play before buying, and they rely on what they read on the internet or videos that they see on the internet. And you know, marketing, you know, artists, you know, endorsements and all that play a role in it. And you know, I feel that our strongest suit, if you will, is when people can actually play our stuff next to other brands. And we will, I feel, fare very well given the opportunity to have that A/B situation where they can actually play them side by side, and that's one of the challenges that we're trying to work through right now, because we a lot of people, you know, they're even buying our stuff based on reputation and what they're reading and hearing, and you know, it's you're just trying to. Ultimately, my goal is I want my customers to feel like they bought the right stuff. It's not just a sale to me.
No.
It's a relationship, and I want to not only meet people's expectations. I want to have them get my stuff, play through it, and say, this is even better than I thought it was going to be. That's my goal as a designer, and I never want anyone to feel like they bought something that they're not happy with. It's just, you know,
that would be even worse, right? You know, why doesn't this really, you know, and that makes me happy as well when people leave my showroom with the right stuff. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just like, they go out with stuff that they sound really, really good.
Right, and it's nothing like a customer. You get feedback, I'm sure, from your customers, and we're here to serve them. We're here to give them a good experience, not just at the sales level, but after the sale. But most importantly, we just want them to enjoy what they do. I enjoy what I do, you enjoy what you do, and it gives me great satisfaction and reward when I see and hear back from players that are using our stuff, that how much it has inspired them and affected their, how they approach their instruments and music, and that's what makes it all worthwhile.
Just one thing, you told me an analogy about how you compared neodymium and ceramic speakers to Class D and tube amps.
Actually, solid state in general.
Solid state in general.
Well, I mean, like getting back to what we were talking about earlier about the two technologies can never be the same. It's just like solid state and tube will never be the same. They are the same to a point. Okay, a well-designed solid state amp and a well-designed tube amp, when they're operated in the linear range, meaning no clipping or distortion, whatever, they should theoretically sound the same. And the same thing goes for a neodymium woofer as well as a ceramic woofer. When they're operating in their linear range, they should sound, there's going to be some characteristic differences, but they should theoretically sound very similar. But just like a tube amp and a solid state amp, where you start hearing their differences and what you like about one versus the other, is when they become nonlinear. And when they become, like when a tube amp clips, we all know that it produces desirable harmonics, and that's what all these distortion pedals are based on, is trying to recreate those harmonics that people love about overdrive and tubes. They clip more gradually, so the harmonics are lower in order, so it's more closer to the root note, so it just sounds like more part of that root note, and it thickens it up and enhances it, versus solid state that clips very sharply, which produces harmonics that are much higher up in level, that are not really connected to that root note, and they create that that raspiness or that harshness, and so just like tube versus solid state, the differences come into how they go from linear to nonlinear. All the different technologies, assuming they're designed at the same quality of design, it really comes down to how they react in their nonlinear range, and it all comes down to the type of harmonics that they produce in that nonlinear range, and that's just, why tube amps have those desirable features and tones that we still to this day in the solid state world try to emulate through distortion pedals, and it's all about how we clip and create harmonics. Fuzz is more like solid state because it's very higher up in level and creates that fuzziness, but you try to do other things to make it a pleasing distortion. And the same thing goes for woofers clip. I mean, woofers go from linear to nonlinear, but the ceramic woofers do it differently than the neos, and that's where I believe the differences in the quality of the sounds, good, bad, or indifferent, lie, and distinguish the two different technologies.
So, you started out making amps 3 years ago?
Actually, this is 2015 is when we introduced the B amp.
So, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
We count 1, 2, 3 years ago.
I do the math.
Yeah.
Like I felt like back in kindergarten, 1, 2, 3. Okay.
3 years ago, you came out with the B amp, which was like that time I worked at TC, and I was like, oh, so now another company is coming with some DSP, and this is like maybe it's like a bit engineering kind of approach that was coming from my point of perspective, but it was like, that's interesting.
Right.
That's obviously a completely different game compared to speakers. How has that been for you?
Well, I never knew what stress really was until I designed my first amplifier. So we can start from that part of it. Yeah. But I'll tell you, it was an incredible experience I never knew what I was undertaking. In fact, I'm glad I didn't know before I started what I was undertaking, because it all paid off, and it's been a great experience. But every step of the way, everything, not just the design aspect, but again the certifications and just bringing the whole product together. And there's so many moving parts designing an amp, where the speaker is just a wood shop and some components. An amplifier, there's just so much involved. And like I said, it was an experience that I learned a lot from. And the only way you're going to learn anything in life is you got to do it. And you got to go. And you also have to graduate from the school of hard knocks. There's no way around it. But like I said earlier, you learn from everything that you do, and you grow from it. And the Forte is the great thing about the Forte is it was the easiest thing to do, because I already done the BM. And but I paid my dues on the BM.
And I guess also with the Forte amp, you also kind of like broadens up the possible market for different kind of bass players, where the B amp is, you gotta be a techie guy.
Actually, you don't. I mean, to be honest with you, you have to be a techie guy to design it. But the more I did my job, and my job as an engineer and the designer of the B amp was to make it so that you don't need to be a techie guy to use it.
Point taken.
No,
but what I mean is that it is a bass amp where you have an LED screens, and you can go in and sub menus,
right.
And you can software update it, and it's really great, and I totally love the concept. But there's also the other line of bass players where they're more into what you see is what you get, and I need to dial into the bass.
Right. Believe me, I learned that. It's kind of interesting, and that's why the Forte came, right? I mean, because after a year and a half or so of the B amp being out in the marketplace, we were learning back, hearing back from our dealers in the field in general, that there were some players that just didn't even, they saw the LCD display and they didn't even care how it sounded. They didn't even want to plug in. Yeah. And I was like, really? I'm not a bass player, and so I just didn't look at it that way. And so I'm like, So, the Forte was basically, so I realized I needed a more traditional amplifier. So I went down that path of, I actually designed an analog amp on paper, with all the, analog filters and all that, which is essentially what the Forte is from a, as you're viewing it here, that's basically what I was designing in the analog world. I see all these pages of schematics that I drew to recreate everything that's here, and it's like, I already have that designed with the B amp. Yeah. All I got to do is get rid of the LCD display, maybe adjust some of the software code in there, and voila, you have like essentially what people play through this amp, and like, I didn't want the digital amp. I'm glad I didn't. I like it. They look at the B amp as a digital amp, and they look at this as an analog amp. And I tell them, I said, well, that's still a digital amp. They're like, it is, and it's like, it's all DSP. It's still got the microcontroller in there and doing all its thing, but it's the user interface is more analog, meaning more familiar. And but to your point a little while ago, it's funny. Just at this NAMM show, I had a customer say exactly what you did. He loved the concept of the B amp, but the Forte was more his amp because of that, plug and play and familiarity. I said, well, has anyone actually sat down with you and shown you the B amp? He's like, well, no. I said, well, you had a few minutes? He said, yeah. So I spent 5 minutes with him. I walked him through the various features, the menus, and then afterwards, I said to him, okay, show me how do you get to the center frequencies? He's like, oh. So he pushed and held one of the tone knobs in for 3 seconds, and there it was. I said, show me where the high pass filter is. It was. So, it's like, I said, do you play any acoustic instruments? He says, yes, I play upright bass. I said, do you ever have any feedback problems? He says, actually, I do. I said, any particular note in general that typically feeds back? He's like, yeah, D. I said, let me show you something about the feedback filter. Hit the filters button. You don't even have to know what frequency it is. We have it by note. So you can go to the note. He's like, wow. So all of a sudden, he's starting to realize what a powerful tool I have here.
Yeah.
And most of the menus, like the ones, the sub menus, like the pre and post DI for the pre and post EQ for the DI, what profile you're using based on the cabinet, those are all set and forget. You're going to set them up once and you're going to just leave them. And so when you first turn it on, and one of the things about the B amp I wanted to make sure is that if you didn't even read the manual, you could take it out of the box, plug it in, and play a gig.
Yeah.
Because
it still sounds good.
and it's still like you turn a knob and you see on the display it increasing, decreasing bass or mid or whatever. And the B amp is everything you want it to be, and if you don't need it all, you don't have to use it.
Yeah.
But it's there, and it's a tool. It's not like let's just make a bunch of bells and whistles to make it seem cool. Every feature in that amp was designed with a purpose. And it was important for me also to make sure that the amp was very intuitive to use. And we've had some very non-techie people that say, geez, it's the easiest thing to use. But yeah, I'm the same way. We're all the same way, right? Sometimes you look at something and right away you close your mind.
Yeah.
But if you just take a deep breath, open your mind up, I guarantee within a half hour you'll know that amp like the back of your hand.
You see the advantages of the B amp, and I think one of the cool things that is with the B amp is that you keep evolving and innovating stuff, like coming with a new compressor and new distortion,
right.
how a new layout, and assigning new knobs.
Yeah, we even able to take the auxiliary volume knob and say, well, most guys can adjust the volume from their MP3 player or whatever the music source is. And I know in this world of distortion, the big thing now is being able to mix clean and dirty together. So I just with a software update, I was able to redesign the auxiliary volume knob in the B amp to a clean, dirty blend. And within 10 seconds, I just reconfigured your amp.
That is so cool. I love that.
So
you've been having a busy name this year, right?
It's been a great name, yeah.
And I expect that you will get an even more busy year next year.
We're excited.
Yeah.
We're definitely looking forward to it. And
so I think there's a lot of things good coming from Bergantino. So Jim, thank you.
Warren, pleasure, and thank you for your time. I appreciate it this morning.
Checking out NAMM 2018. See you guys. Back to the groove.